Good morning. This service 23, celebrating Ken Patton and the dream of a universal religion. Our hymn of the month is bulletin. We get through 2 times of Thanksgiving. We give thanks. You're invited to stand if you wish. We give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away. This time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. One more time. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away. For this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. You may be seated.
Good morning. My name is Georgetta Walsh, and I'm the Sunday Associate for this week. We welcome you with words from Kenneth Patton, who served as our minister from 1964 to 1986. Unto the memory of the gods of our ancestors, the dignity and splendor of their faith, we bow in gratitude. The strength of their prayers, The challenge of their convictions live in us, no matter how our beliefs have changed. We are one faith, fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, seeking together down the ages to bring the kingdom of heaven out of the dreams of the past to establish it on earth. As we do each week, we invite you to join in the words for lighting our chalice. They are printed in the bulletin. We light this chalice for the hope of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action as we gather together in the circle of community.
Ken Patton wrote, "Our invading minds have corrupted the nimbus of wonder. The universe is no longer an ear for listening. We no longer bow and submit to presences, for the sun and all stones speak not. We speak to ourselves silently and to our fellows in fast words." I want to invite you this morning to pause for a moment, try to stop those inner voices that talk to us all the time. Let's admit it, we all hear them, even if we don't have a diagnosis. Can we listen to silence without silently commenting on how long it's lasting, or who's coughing, or what we would rather be doing right now? And then, can we hear the sound of the bell as though we've never heard it before? What might this sound say to us? Open your ears and listen. Many, if not most, of the words we will use in the service today come from the pen of Kenneth L. Patton. Our opening words are found in the current hymnal, actually. We invite you to read responsively. You'll find them in your bulletin. Let us worship with our eyes and ears and fingertips.
Let us love the world through heart and mind and body.
We feed our eyes upon the mystery and revelation in the faces of our brothers and sisters.
We seek to know the wistfulness of the very young and the very old, the wistfulness of people in all times of life.
We seek to understand the shyness behind arrogance, the fear behind pride, the tenderness behind clumsy strength, and the anguish behind cruelty.
All life flows into a great common life if we will only open our eyes to our companions.
Let us worship, not in bowing down, not with closed eyes and stopped ears.
Let us worship with the opening of all the windows of our beings, with the full outstretching of our spirits.
Life comes with singing and laughter, with tears and confiding, with a rising wave too great to be held in the mind and heart and body to those who have fallen in love with life.
Let us worship and let us learn to love.
So I was invited by Reverend Sarah and Laura Craig to lead today's service because I've been doing a project called Digitizing Ken Patton, Universalist. With the help of a grant from the New York State Convention of Universalists, I've been scanning Ken's papers in the archive and converting cassette recordings of sermons to digital format and posting it online. So most of this service will be created, as I say, from the words of Ken Patton and dedicated to learning more about his dream of a universal religion. We're going to sing a hymn which he wrote to a tune that's connected with another hymn by Martin Luther. The tune will be familiar, and perhaps it'll be hard for you to get the other words out of your head if you know it. But see if you can do that and celebrate how great and glorious it is to be human. We are dust of the earth, and yet we are conscious dust. This hymn is admittedly anthropocentric in its vision, triumphalist, and at the same time, hopefully optimistic. I love it. So I invite you to stand and let us sing together proudly, "We are the earth, upright and proud." That sounds great. We'll listen to it once, and then we'll sing the two hymns, the two verses. We are the earth, upright and proud. In us the earth is knowing. Its words are music in our mouths. In us its rivers flowing. The sun is our heart's fire, warm with the earth's desire, and with its purpose strong, we sing earth's pilgrim song. In earth the earth lift our voices will the skies with our exultant singing. We dedicate our minds and hearts to order, beauty bringing. Our labor is our strength, our love will win our pain. Our minds will find the ways to live in peace and praise. Our day is just beginning. You may be seated. And now Trustee Liz Kempey will lead us in sharing our vision.
Good morning. I'm Liz Kempey, a member of the Board of Trustees. It's good to be with you this morning. One of the promises we make to each other in our shared covenant at USR is to support this organization with our presence, our gifts, and service, and to care for each other and the long-term well-being of our community. Our caring team helps us to care for one another. We like to remind you on Sundays that the team can be reached by calling the office and speaking to Anne. You can let her know if you want to share a celebration or if you have a need this congregation can help meet. The work of the caring team is vital, so please also let us know if you want to participate. For the long-term well-being of our community, by investing in the vision of justice and freedom that we share, we remember that it will take all our different talents, gifts, and support to make that vision a reality. So a couple of announcements this morning about ways to get involved. So this coming week, Wednesday on the 8th at 12 in the conference room, we have the Brown Bag Lunch. At 1 on Wednesday the 8th, lecture series in the fellowship room. On Thursday the 9th, 1 p.m., there's a Zoom, poetry on Zoom. We don't want you to forget that the holiday market, one of my personal favorites, is coming up November the 17th. So 5 to 9 will be wine and cheese and a reception. And then on Saturday, the 18th, 10 to 5, the crafts will be open, fine crafts and a bake sale. And volunteers are definitely needed, so contact Kristen Plumley, I don't know if she's here today, if you can all help out. And last but not least, we have the Share the Porch for Church World service. Coats, warm sweaters, anything warm and cozy. If you have any questions, I think Deb Goodell would be the good contact point for that. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. Thank you.
So today we're celebrating an avowed humanist's vision and life. So what does someone who claims to be a partial theist, let me say it that way, and that would be myself, what does it mean to share joys and concerns or to make a prayer if you don't believe that there is a God up there or anywhere else that intervenes in human existence, that you could ask to make a difference? If God is simply the love that exists all around us and within us, what does prayer mean? It's simply offering our personal energy and intention to share the love that's within us. So when we talk about our joys and our concerns, what we're doing is inviting others into our world, into our hearts. So today we ask you, if you have a joy or a concern you'd like to share, please jot it down on the paper that you might have received, or if you're on Zoom, you can jot it in the chat and Jan Botcher will read it for us there. Do we have some joys or concerns? Bob Jones writes, "Thank you to all the hosts and guests at the congregational dinners. They were over 70 of us enjoying a wonderful night with old and new friends." Good work. And I understand that's at least twice as many as we had sign up back before COVID. So the energy of interest in communing with each other is very, very strong. Georgetta Walsh writes, "A shout out to the caring committee. The team is actively following some of our congregants in need. They're diligently calling and visiting those who've reached out to us. Make your needs known by calling Ann Peretti." Cecilia Bistrom writes, "We learned this week that my husband, George, received a diagnosis for throat cancer. Our prayers and our energies and love are with you." I've been told that on the Zoom meeting today, we have Clarice Patton, the daughter of Ken Patton and his literary executor. Clarice, it's wonderful to have you with us through this medium. Jen, do we have any other notes in the chat? It would seem appropriate to acknowledge what's going on in Israel and Palestine. Here I'm speaking only for myself, my own joys and concerns, not the board or USR, but we know that the outrageous, murderous Hamas-led attack on Israel has been followed by even more deadly violence of Israel against Palestinians. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is horrific. Water, food, and fuel are running out while the Israeli government continues its bombing and invasion. We don't have to watch passively, call it a ceasefire or a humanitarian pause. We can advocate. Learn more by going to the website of Unitarian Universalists for Justice in the Middle East and put our UU values to work. At this point, Jen, any joys or concerns? Then I'd like to invite you into a time of guided meditation. Again, we're going to be using the words of Ken Patton. This is an accounting of gratitude found in his Hymns of Humanity. I invite you to find a comfortable position, as comfortable as you can. Begin by paying attention to your breathing. If you wish to close your eyes, if that helps you to focus, go ahead and do that if it's comfortable. We make an accounting for our gratitude. For the universe, we give thanks. Room of life, opening us to wonder. For earth, we give thanks. fragment of the stars that is our home, swathed with air, washed with waters, skeleton of stone cushioned by fat loam. For life, we give thanks. A burning of stars, ordered and tempered to the milder uses of blood and chlorophyll. For people, we give thanks. For their accustomed acts of consideration, for the order of society enabling us to live in dignity and freedom. For parents, we give thanks, whose patience blessed our days, passing to us in turn the honor of our children, the delicacy of their hands and feet. For co-workers, we give thanks, for the merging of labors, in which the goods of prosperity are brought to all. Things made by another's hands establish us in gratitude. For growth, we give thanks, for fellowship, for forces enriching us, ways past our knowing, power past our control. And for ages beyond our sojourn, for eternity in which our days are magnified in being lived therein, we give thanks. And if your eyes are closed, open them when you're ready.
We're going to do another responsive reading for This House by Ken Patton. This house is for the ingathering of nature and human nature.
It is a house of friendships, a haven in trouble, an open room for the encouragement of our struggle.
It is a house of freedom, guarding the dignity and worth of every person.
It offers a platform for the free voice, for declaring, both in times of security and danger, the full and undivided conflict of opinion.
It is a house of truth-seeking, where scientists can encourage devotion to their quest, where mystics can abide in a community of searchers.
It is a house of art, adorning its celebrations with melodies and handiworks.
It is a house of prophecy, outrunning times past and times present in visions of growth and progress.
This house is a cradle for our dreams, the workshop of our common endeavor.
I'd like to give credit where credit is due. Jack Lohr brought this composer to my attention, and it's wonderful music. It's a great compliment to any service because there's a meditative, almost an Ethiopian raga-esque
So thank you, Ron. This is indeed an Ethiopian-born composer. You can read about her in the bulletin. Uh, yeah, I discovered her through a cassette, no, an online listing of her 1970-something album, Ethiopique. But it is beautiful, and I'm so grateful to you, Ron, for playing this music.
There's I think, centennial celebration.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Our next reading is also responsive. This house. I'm sorry, we did that. Universal Religion, that's our topic for today, by Ken Patton. Please join me in reading responsively. All of us are brothers and sisters, though we have grown strangers to one another.
Though we are born here and now, yet we are citizens of the universe, and all eternity is gathered in the days of our life.
Though we are citizens of but one country, yet a feeling of kinship opens us to citizenship in all nations.
Though we speak but one tongue, yet all the words of the race are contrived for our understanding.
We are ignorant of the story of other lands, unmoved by their arts and aspirations. We are blind to beauties our eyes are not trained to discover.
We call only that good which we have named good, and announce the other people's righteousness and evil doing.
We consume in small talk and menial concerns the days that might be invested in attaining the means of universal sympathy and understanding.
Yet we have glimpsed the whole in that fragment which we have seen. We know the dream of a united human family, all the greatness of humankind gathered into one glory.
All our yearning welded into one unconquerable desire.
All the law and morality of the race gathered into one ethic and jurisprudence.
All the prophets of all faiths installed in one pantheon of spiritual heroes.
All the poetry and prophecy canonized in a single Bible.
All the scattered tribes and nations, citizens of one commonwealth.
This universal faith, in which all wisdom and goodness we made one, we find a home for the human spirit, the adequacy of generous desires, the furthest dimensions of our aspiration.
So may it be. So most of you never met Ken Patton. I know this by looking at the dates at which our membership joined. About 90% of us never met Ken Patton. Maybe some have never heard of him. He was the minister here, as Georgetta pointed out, from 1964 to 1986. Before coming to USR, he served as minister for the Charles Street Meeting House in Boston. The Massachusetts Universalist Convention had invited Ken to transform an early 19th century federal-style church into a home for a universal religion. He brought his love and knowledge of the arts and religion to transform the space into a setting for a truly universal religion, one which would combine the art, literature, idealism, philosophies, music, and symbolism of all the world's religions into a religion for one world. Ken rearranged the traditional New England pews into circular seating, added new interior details of art and symbolism from the world's religion and from science, including a bookcase of world Bibles, as he said, a mural of the great nebula in Andromeda, and of the atom. Charles A. Howe summarized the impact of Ken's project. The Charles Street Meeting House made significant contributions to liberal religion. Chief among these were, first, the wealth of worship materials, responsive readings, meditations, opening and closing words, and hymn texts written by Patton and distributed throughout both the Universalist and Unitarian denominations, and later the UUA, many of which remain in use today. And second, the church's promotion of the idea of universal religions, a religion for one world, drawing on all sources of religious faith, knowledge, and practice. I know that the dream of universal religion might be open to the criticism of being eclectic, so-called salad bar religion, that picks its preferred ingredients from all over. Or it might be called cultural appropriation, that takes what does not belong to it, a spiritual theft, if you will. However, I think that's a superficial critique by people who don't really read Ken Patton. It hasn't actually listened to Ken's highly nuanced articulation of his vision. In his book, A Religion for One World, Art and Symbols for a Universal Religion, he would explain, we have gathered the symbols and art of the world's religions to adorn our place of religious celebration. Thus, we declare that they all belong to us, but by the fact that they are all there, with all their mutual contradictions and identities, we declare that we belong to none of them, not to any selection or combination of them. They do not signify a one world faith, but rather a religion for one world. And the difference between these two concepts is crucial. I never met Ken Patton, but since coming to USR, I feel that I've gotten to know him, even to be a student of his. Ken was gifted and flawed, like all of us. He was human. And as a humanist, he believed that the universe was filled with beauty and that humanity, despite our viciousness and stupidity, had a glorious potential, often best seen in artists like himself, to make beauty and meaning from the ordinary elements of everyday existence. I'd like for you actually to hear his voice. I'm going to ask Judd to play a clip from a 1985 sermon commenting on the words Unitarian and Universal. He never made it his project here at USR, but I think he would have been okay with our dropping the word Unitarian from our title and also from the denomination. Let's listen and hope that you can all hear this.
I think when the merger occurred, we really missed the boat. We should have dropped the word Unitarian like a hot potato, like Presbyterianism and Episcopalianism and the Baptists. It is a technical, ecclesiastical, and denominational word that has literally no use outside its local reference. Whereas the word universal and universalism is a truly great word and should have become our word. The Unitarian should have modestly said, we will now be the Universalist Church or the Universalist religious organization.
Thanks, Jed. Ken Patton absolutely believed in universalism, not as a quaint Christian dogma about whether there's a hell, but as a possibility shared by all humanity. I've asked a couple of people who actually knew Ken Patton to speak briefly now. Carol Loscalzo, would you be first?
Jack asked me to speak and expand on the warmer, more human side of Ken's personality. Before I do that, I want to briefly tell you why we came to USR and why we stayed, in spite of a minister who only wrote books and poetry, gave excellent addresses, and was a tower in the movement, yet not especially ministerial. Many of you who know of Ken's ministry at USR are aware he was distant and shy. Committees were formed by the Board of Trustees to discuss that Ken was not pastoral enough. He acknowledged that he did not see his job to be pastoral, as in visiting the sick, greeting newcomers, etc., and that it was not his strong suit. In spite of this, the congregation, knowing his strengths and intellectualism, supported Ken's ministry. Frank and I joined our first UU congregation in 1965 in Madison, Wisconsin. Their building, now a historical landmark, was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. The former minister, Ken Patton, had been instrumental in convincing Wright to design the building. Ken was a big presence in Madison. The hymnal, the first hymnal of the combined Unitarian Universalist movement, had 13 Patton hymns out of 327 and 30 readings out of 230. When we moved to Bergen County in 1970, it was a no-brainer for us to join the congregation where Ken was the minister. He did not disappoint. His addresses on Sunday morning were incredible. He read the New York Times every Sunday and often adjusted his addresses accordingly. Ridgewood congregants told us about Ken's hiring and why they continued to support his ministry. As humanists, we stayed, which we saw as supporting a minister who was a poet, an artist, a writer, a developer of contemporary liberal religion, and an incredible thinker. Jack has said that he thought Ken had a wounded personality, and I concur. On first meeting him, he was very clearly shy, uncomfortable with small talk, and some would describe him as standoffish. I always thought that there were at least two issues that defined Ken and contributed to who he was. Frank and I spent an afternoon with Clarice Patton, Ken's daughter and literary executor, preparing for his 100th birthday event. I told her my theories and she agreed. Ken's early years were in a small town in Michigan where his family attended a very strict Christian fundamentalist church. He had never met his father. Ken often said as a child without a father, he felt out of place in this community. The second issue is that Ken had numerous acne scars. In my opinion, both of these issues contributed to his feeling that he stood out negatively. They most certainly contributed to his shy personality. The first Sunday we attended USR, I noticed Ken walking toward the RE building with a little boy in tow. I assumed it was his grandchild. However, it was his son, Channing, who was about 3 years old at the time. Ken and his second wife, Mitzi, had another son, Dag. He and Mitzi divorced several years later. Mitzi moved to DC with Channing and Dag. Ken railed about this often, clearly very upset, on here in the pulpit. He also spoke fondly of the times that he had visitation with the boys. Eventually, they both moved back to be with him in Ridgewood. Channing came to the 100th birthday celebration in 2011 for his father. At the service last month, I spoke of Ken's naming our son Rob in 1972. When Rob was 3 months old, he was a baby who smiled constantly. So he just smiled at Ken throughout the naming. Ken smiled and said, if this baby is like this throughout his life, he will be fine. Another time, a close friend told me that she and her family had gone to speak to Ken when they were having a difficult time. She found him extremely helpful. In Doris Armstrong's book, published in 1997, Unitarians in Ridgewood, she stated that people did go to him and found him helpful. Ken was an artist and always worked to integrate art and architecture into his ministry. Soon after coming to Ridgewood, he convinced the congregation to rebuild the traditional church building into the open, multi-purpose space we all share today. Ken collected African masks and other art. During the years of the Uncommon Market, our traditional fall fair, he offered them for sale and gave the congregation a generous percentage. He loved to talk to people about the items. He was in his element when there was a topic that interested him. I remember one year he had small, very pretty antique glass vases. Our daughter, Karen, then was around 12 years old and liked them a lot, and I purchased 2 for her. Ken told me how pleased he was that he had items that the children liked and were affordable. I asked Chris Henriksen about Ken, and she said the following. What I do remember is that for many years, Ken offered his services as a painter at the service auction. One year, we were successful bidders. He came over and painted 2 walls of our kitchen the yellow that I had requested. We had lunch together, and he was very gracious and friendly with both me and the kids. When USR needed space painted, Ken volunteered to do it. Actually, he believed that we should not pay to have someone to paint. He also did other building maintenance because he cared deeply about this congregation and its financial health. I hope that this little bit that I've been able to give you gives you a more complete picture of who Ken was. Thank you.
And our other speaker will be Bob Jones. Thank you.
Good morning. Unlike Carol, I only knew Ken at the end of his career. But back in 1986, when I first became involved in the society, Ken was just beginning his retirement from active ministry. Josiah Bartlett was our interim minister. However, Ken still gave services for the next few years. His intellect, his vision, and his writing were among the reasons I joined this society. But it was a time when Ken was becoming more irascible, and the members of the congregation, especially those that didn't know him well, became increasingly irritated by his rather gruff and distancing manner. I was president of the board from 93 to 95, and in the autumn of 94, Terry Ellen, our minister at that time, and I were concerned about Ken's need to push people away, as well as his great success in doing so with the congregation. So just prior to the holidays, we decided to ask the board for $100 to buy him a bottle of port. Terry brought it to Ken on Christmas Eve with the thanks and the good wishes of the congregation. Ken died later that evening, or in the early hours of the next morning. I was pleased that the last person from the society to visit Ken was Terry Ellen, bringing the gratitude and good wishes of the congregation, whether Ken liked it or not. When Jack asked if I would share a little of my experience with Ken, I wrote him the following. Alone, with a pen in his hand, Ken could touch the core of many aspects of life with a sensitivity and a grace that was awe-inspiring. However, in his interpersonal relations, he was a very wounded man, and I would expect a wounded little boy. Yet I think that the pool of sadness and pain within Ken was really a source of his brilliance. He surely was a prickly pear. He actually refused to marry Marion and me. To this day, it amuses me. Marion never quite saw the humor in it. For me, it was just so Ken. He was retired. Marion and I foolishly picked a weekend to get married that was a GA weekend. Our interim minister was halfway across the country, headed home to California. And every other Unitarian minister that we knew, except Ken, was headed to GA. Luckily, we managed to find someone to marry us, but it was an interesting conversation. I called Ken, and I introduced myself. I said, I would like you to marry Marion and me. And his response was, why would I want to do that? And my response was, well, I guess you wouldn't. So anyway, the few times I went to General Assembly in the 90s, whenever a young seminary student heard that we knew Ken, it was as if Ken was a rock star to them. They knew him through his writings and his vision. When gathering my thoughts for today, I said to a friend, Ken was held in tremendous affection by many and great esteem, but sadly, mostly by those who didn't know him real well. From what little I know of Ken's early life, and Carol touched on it, it was a difficult one, marked by some amount of emotional abandonment and deprivation. And you may hear people, and Jack did, describe Ken as gruff, stubborn, rude, grumpy, arrogant, even bullheaded. He probably was all of that at times. Yet listen to the words of his prayer that we said earlier. We seek to understand the shyness behind arrogance, the fear behind pride, the tenderness behind clumsy strength, and the anguish behind cruelty. Those words came from the core of Ken Patton and who he was.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, congregation, for receiving this tribute. Ken Patton continues to influence and shape USR and the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, to this day. I hope you will get to know him better through the Digital Archive Project and links to other materials that will be showing up online. Ken was never an absolutist about his humanism. He believed he had much to learn from other traditions and invited members who disagreed with him to join in dialogue. He could never get USR to agree to do what he used to do up at the Charles Street Meeting House. They would have an hour-long service and then an hour for feedback from the congregation to talk about what he had presented. He said that he thought it was because of the demographics here. I'd say we were just too busy living lives of noisy desperation. If you have comments or questions or challenges to anything I've presented in today's service, I will welcome your responses, but I can't stay around for an hour. Thank you very much for listening. Our closing hymn, also by Ken Patton, Ours Be the Poems of All Tongues. It is a doxology set to Old Hundredth. Here we go. Ours be the poems of all tongues, all things of loveliness and worth, all arts, all ages, and all songs, one life, one beauty, on the earth.
Would you join us in extinguishing the chalice? We extinguish the flame, but may the hope of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action burn bright in our hearts until we are together again.
My closing words are a companion to the opening words by Ken Patton from Hymns of Humanity. We make appeal to common ideals of justice and mercy, to the dreams of ancestors, their worship of their gods, their visions of the truth, and to the larger visions growing in our children, dedicating our strength and will to the good. So USR, go out there and use your strength to do the good. Finally, I am not going to say, so may it be, because to me that suggests that someone or something other than ourselves is going to be the agent to make things be. I'm going to say, let's make it happen. The future is up to us. We can do this.